welcome to the Coaching Uncovered podcast. My name is Brent Davis and I'm the host of the podcast, and this is my podcast where I get to talk to coaches about coaching. And today we have got a golf pro from New South Wales on the line, Khan Pullen. Thanks for coming in, Khan, and talking to me.
Thanks for having me on, Brent. Really looking forward to it.
I think we've got some pretty cool stories to share with you. You've had a few diverse roles through your years as a PGA professional, so I'm keen to explore that. But for the people who don't know you out there, tell us a bit about yourself.
Well, I guess it depends on how far you want to go back, but I guess, I got into golf around about sort of 13, 14 years of age. Played probably a multi-sport athlete, I guess you would say. These days, primarily played sort of soccer in winter and baseball in summer, throw in a bit of tennis and swimming and all those other things that we do here. And I guess, it's probably a little pertinent to the role that I have now, but I remember I was a reasonable sort of baseball player as a young kid, and went for a trial in the state team for the baseball team and never got selected. And it was sort of the coach's son that got the position that I was in.
Wow.
So pretty much all said to mum and dad, I don't want to play any more team sports. I want to play an individual sport where I basically can control my own destiny a little bit. So that ended up being golf. My dad played golf. He hadn't played for a long time when I wanted to get into it, but he played sort of socially. He was left-handed, but I didn't start as a left-hander. I had to get some right-handed clubs and went out and played a little local muni course, Liverpool golf course, which just a little, as I said, public course, 9 holes. And pretty much from that point on, I was pretty much all hooked on the sport, and it became pretty much all my whole obsession from that point onwards, pretty much.
That's cool. That's cool. So the team sport obviously left a bit of a sour taste in your mouth, I'm sure, with team choices going that way. That's obviously a bit challenging for you as a kid.
Yeah, it was. I really enjoyed it, but I guess that challenge. I guess I'm kind of naturally a bit of an introverted person as well, so I guess golf sometimes can tend to lend itself to those introverted type people that just want to have some time on their own. And I guess I found in golf that, obviously you're playing with others, but you're sort of totally in control of your own. But I guess the practice side of it, you're just doing it on your own. And I guess I just love the idea of just being able to go out on my own and, not relying on anyone else to throw any balls to me or to do whatever. I could just go up and, spend my time, as many hours I pretty much wanted, just, playing and practicing and all those type of things as well. So I guess that sort of part of golf really sort of clicked with me as well, just to be able to do my own thing.
I'm certainly on that same page when it comes to doing it by yourself. I do enjoy that side of golf. That's it's a pretty cool sport for that type of personality, which I am as well. So that's pretty cool. So tell me about getting into the traineeship. Where did you do your traineeship, and who did you do it under? And did you stay in the Sydney area, or did you go somewhere else?
No, I stayed in the Sydney area. I had I really wasn't sure what I wanted to do coming to the end of year 12. I did know in the end, not too very late, that golf is what I wanted to pursue as a profession. But I guess back in the day then, there wasn't too many other pathways. I certainly wasn't good enough to be going to any tour schools or anything like that at that particular point in time. And it wasn't too much about US college, and there wasn't really too much with, institute programs and all those type of things as well. So my parents took me up to the local PGA member at New Brighton Golf Club, where I was a junior member up, and sought the advice of Kyle Francis, who was the head pro there at that time, and what I should do. And he suggested that I, maybe look at doing a PGA traineeship, which I did. Kyle actually moved away. There was a changing of, he moved and got the head pro job at Concord not too long after that. And I actually started doing a little bit of work in the greenkeeper shed down at New Brighton initially. And then Bruce Smith, who took over from Kyle as the pro at New Brighton Golf Club, said, look, I will be looking for a trainee commencing next year. How would you like to come and start in the pro shop, in about April? I really wasn't enjoying working on the green shed, cutting the rough and doing all those type of things. So that wasn't going to be my thing. That wasn't going to be my go. So from that, I said, yeah, absolutely, I'd love to. So I went and started working in the pro shop sort of April in that year after I finished my HSC, and started my traineeship the year after with, as said, Bruce Smith. That was my PGA Pro that I'd done it under.
Nice. So 3 years straight through, and then out on tour and out playing some golf, I'm assuming.
Yeah, I did a little bit.
everyone tries, don't they? Early on, everyone goes out there and has a crack at that playing side of it.
Yeah, look, and that was certainly me. I'd sort of saved a little bit of money through my sort of traineeship, and had enough to try and went up to Malaysia and played, which is, I guess, part of now what they call the Asian Development Tour. But then it was only sort of in Malaysia. So I went up there and played 8 events up there, and kind of enjoyed that experience. Other for the point where I got quite ill for a few days up there with food poisoning. So that was, I guess, a real experience into that. Just played pro-ams, played a lot of the Von Nider events, which it was in those, the Tier 2 events back in the day. And I basically had a crack at playing for, I would say, a good sort of 2 to 3 years till I pretty much all ran out of money and realised I wasn't good enough pretty much. And yeah, then I sort of, explored other options, I guess, in the golf industry.
It can be a bit of a shock to the system sometimes when you get out of the trainee program and decide you want to go and play, and you start to see how good those actual players really are. It's a challenging space.
Yeah, it is. And look, there was I won't dive too much into it, but I had a few sort of other things, life things going at that time. I was sort of engaged and all those type of things as well, and not earning a great deal of money, so there was other sort of commitments that I was sort of was going to be facing coming up, and decided to go somewhere else. That sort of didn't work out, that engagement. But yeah, by that time I really didn't have too much money to go and pursue playing anymore, at any rate. And as I said, I didn't realise it was probably wasn't going to be good enough. But probably reflecting back now, I wish I'd give myself a few more years, because I think I didn't really have a great deal of experience, not starting really playing the game of golf till I was 13 or 14, and really not playing any more competitive 10 years later, and realizing what you sort of know now and how long it sort of takes. I probably cut myself short, a few years probably. But again, you still need, and I appreciate, I guess in the role I'm in now, the financial resources and all those things that are required to actually be able to support yourself, especially, if you're not fortunate enough to, have other sources of income coming in to help you with that.
It's a hard space, because it is, and it does take it does take some time sometimes to turn into a player, and if you don't have that cash there, you just, if you think back how many careers could have been cut off because they just don't have the cash there to be able to go out there and keep grinding along, and which is obviously where the Golf Australia programs come into it, which we'll talk about as we go along with you.
Absolutely.
A bit further on. But it's hard if you don't have that cash behind you to actually keep grinding it out there. It's a challenging space. So how did you find playing through Asia? You said you got sick. Was it a shock to the system after coming from Australia?
It sure was. I mean, I probably, I don't remember specific times, but I'm sure I've had food poisoning before, but I definitely don't remember anything as extreme as what I was when I was over there. Pretty much I laid up in bed for 3 to 4 days. I was fortunate because the tour was sort of 3 weeks, and then we come back to Kuala Lumpur for a while, and I had a week there before we sort of had to take off for the next 3 tournaments. So I kind of had nothing on, but I just remember not pretty much being able to get out of bed and spending my time between the bed and the bathroom for about 3 or 4 days, and having hot sweats and cold shivers, and that was kind of it. And had to sort of eventually go and seek out a doctor, which I was a little bit nervous about, to try and get a little shot in the where to try and make me feel a little bit better. So I was a little bit nervous about getting that done as well, but sort of started to feel a little bit better from that point. But yeah, I guess these are just some of the things that I was very raw and didn't know anything about that kind of stuff. Hadn't done much travel, as a young kid, as a family, internationally, anything like that, even just general sort of family holidays. So there is certainly much more to managing about being on tour rather than just sort of golfing your ball around the golf course. There's so many other things that you need to manage in that space, that's for sure.
I'm sure you can draw on all that experience when it comes to coaching your players, but my own personal experience was in between Taiwan and China. So coaching in Taiwan, you couldn't drink the water, but you could clean your teeth in it. So it was okay to brush your teeth in. China, you couldn't. And I had that same problem. Trying to get time between the toilet and the bathroom was always and the bedroom was a challenge. getting sick over there, so I don't envy you over there at all, mate. It's a tough space to be in, tough times.
Yeah, absolutely.
So the playing obviously didn't work out, so we came back to coaching. So Tell me about the first step into the coaching world after your playing career's finished.
Oh, look, but I probably initially had a number of like assistant slash teaching pro roles. I was doing a little bit of that sort of at New Brighton during that time when I sort of was playing. So I was trying to manage that a little bit as well. And I'd done a little bit of that when my sort of playing days were over. My first real, I guess you would say, full-time employment after stopped playing in the golf industry was with Wayne Worthy out at Line Golf Club. So I was the assistant pro there and teaching pro there. So primarily doing junior clinics and ladies clinics and those type of things, coaching the pennant teams, one-on-one lessons and those type of things. So I was there for a good sort of 12 months. I then had the opportunity, unique opportunity, to do a little bit of work with the Jack Newton Academy, which was based out of Riverside Oaks. And that was a full-time live-in program where Peter Van Wiegen was running that then, and I knew Peter through my traineeship. And it was a partnership that Jack had struck up with a Korean business partner where he would bring some Koreans down. They'd live in at Riverside Oaks full-time and basically learn to play themselves. They come down with various playing levels from, good A-grade golfers to, not playing much at all, learn to play and then learn to coach and go back to Korea and basically be teaching professionals. So I really enjoyed that. I basically lived out at Riverside Oaks myself from, drove out Sunday night and drove back home Friday night. And it was probably my first real furor into sort of full-time coaching. And I knew that's kind of where I wanted to be. I'm a terrible retailer. Can't sell anything. So I knew retail was never going to be my area. And while I did enjoy sort of coaching let's call it your club member, my passion was really in, I guess, development programs, juniors, and those that were pursuing, I guess, let's call them serious golfers as you like, that were really interested in improving rather than, I guess, just the quick half an hour or 1 hour lessons or whatever it may be. So it's definitely and more along with, I guess, in the end, the better player as opposed to the B or C grade or whatever it may have been. But I did have a number of other roles. I worked at the Lakes and Bankstown Golf Club as well. A couple of things at the Lakes. A couple of times I was at the Lakes, which was great. But I guess again to skip a few years sort of forward. I had the opportunity then from sort of 2000 through to early 2003 to work with Jack Newton Junior Golf full time, initially as a development officer, which pretty much will see me going out to schools 5 days a week and doing modified golf activities, but it also did give me the opportunity to go and do like country camps, work with the sports high schools, and have that opportunity. I was working with Glenn Whittle, who's another PGA member who was running, was the head coach at that stage. I was the assistant. Glenn then moved on to run the Sweps junior program with the PGA then, and I sort of took over as the head coach role at Jack Newton Junior Golf. And I guess that's where my coaching knowledge expanded, but also coaching administration, which is kind of the role that I'm sort of in now, expanded as well, and knowledge of that role sort of comes through. And again, that sort of finished up, and I had a few sort of varying roles again through to sort of 2008, more assistance roles, and that's where I again began back with Jack Newton Junior Golf. I got an invite to come back. By that time, they had an influx of funding through a private benefactor, and the role had sort of totally changed, and I was pretty much all managing the coaching programs then, which had expanded. There was regional academies up here in New South Wales, and I had a lot more sort of hands-on coaching with talented juniors myself at that time, and I pretty much all started there, and then a number of other roles with Golf New South Wales and Golf Australia sort of come along after that as well, with as a high performance manager. So kind of where we're up to now. Yeah.
Really cool. Plenty of things to talk about in that employment history.
Yeah.
But just quickly, the Riverside Oak space, that golf club's probably changed hands a few times over the years. I know the company I was employed by in China bought it in 2009-ish. So, yeah, it was in Korean hands at one stage there as well, and it's changed hands a few times over the years.
Yeah, it has. I think there's a New Zealand guy owned it there for a while as well. I can't remember directly who owned it that time, but it was a really good facility for that type of business. They could actually live in there. There wasn't 2 golf courses at the time. There was only the one, but there was a good practice facility. There was total nearly like exclusivity. The practice range is actually over where the new Bungool course is, was pretty much exclusive to the academy. So it was great, and it was just great to have. There was probably, there were some local kids there as well, but mostly Koreans. We had probably 15 or 20 kids there at any one time, and it was just good to be in that sort of full time environment, really. And it was just a good opportunity.
Yeah, that's cool. The course I was at in China, it snowed for obviously part of the year, so we brought them down to Australia to train when it was cold. So,
Yeah.
and as you said, perfect place because you got houses on course there that they can stay in, accommodation, great practice set up, and they could play golf all day, every day. It was pretty cool, and they were pretty obsessed with the kangaroos that you can see on the golf course up there.
Yes, that was a constant, distraction, if you would like to call it that. Yeah.
So that was pretty cool. So, how did you find coaching the school groups? So, obviously, you said one of your early jobs with the Jack Newton Foundation was to go into schools 5 days a week.
Yeah.
How was that? How did you cope with that?
Interesting. Like, a lot of the times you might have been one with 25 to 30 kids in the class. Most of the time there was obviously a teacher there as well. You just had to be very organised, I found. Like, you just had to be there early, have the safety structures in place, a definite lesson plan. You obviously had to be good at, communication and all those things, safety. So by the time, I wouldn't say I was an expert at it, but I'd done that many of them. And obviously I had the opportunity to see Glenn Whittle done it and learn off him as well. So, and Glenn was a real, I guess, sort of kind of a leader in junior golf, especially at that grassroots and modified golf. I know Mark Holland done a little bit of stuff before that with Jack Newton as well before Glenn, but I got to learn a fair bit off Glenn. And I would say it's just making sure that you're organised, having the appropriate equipment, having a plan, and having good communication skills. It can be daunting initially, but I in the end, you really get to enjoy it. You get to, see the improvement they can, because back in the time, then we're going into maybe 3 to 5 week programs. So you go back into the same school 3 to 5 weeks. So you could get to see the improvement and the kids really enjoying it. So yeah, it was quite an enjoyable experience. I'd have to say I got burnt out pretty quick because it is high energy and all that sort of stuff. A lot of the times you might have been doing 5 or 6 classes in a day, and if, as I said, you're doing that 4 to 5 times a week, it's you can get burnt out pretty quickly doing it. That's for sure. Yeah.
It certainly gives you respect for our teachers out there that get that are doing that every day, day in, day out with primary school kids and high school kids. Certainly a challenging space to be involved with.
Yeah, that's right. But it is, as I said, it is enjoyable, and I guess you do feel like for me as a PJ member, I know part of it is to give back to the game and to try and grow the game, and I definitely felt like I had the ability to do that through that role. That's for sure.
I used to call the kids clinics at schools control chaos. If you can keep it safe and set those rules up, but it is controlled chaos basically. It's a hard space to be involved with full time.
Yeah, for sure.
So, how much of an uptake did you get from those clinics into golf? Was that something that was tracked by the organisation, or?
Oh, look, it's always has been a challenge by that. Initially, it was, it's done a lot better now, and credit to Peter and Jack Newton Junior Golf, and I guess I spent a lot of time with Peter in that sort of space, and it's certainly done a lot better now than what it was. But it was initially, we might have just had a bit of paper that we handed out to the kids at the end of the program and said, look, here's the local golf clubs, here's some contact numbers, off you go. But it's a lot more organised now in trying to do some initial engagement with the kids at the school, but really are trying to get them to the golf course as quickly as possible. Try and transition those kids to some early exposure at the school, but then trying to get them to experience real golf, hitting real golf balls in the real golf course environment, and trying to actually get them and use them as a feeder program into the clubs, cadet programs or beginner clinics or whatever they may have had running at the time. So it is definitely a lot more structured, and there is a direct more pathway into the golf clubs that has been set up. I know with Jack Newton Junior Golf and Golf Australia are trying to do those things around the country where it is a lot more, easier pathway for the kids and parents to find out what that next step is.
It's certainly easier that you can send them straight to a website now where they can just search up their postcode and find the closest centres that have got junior programs in place. So that's certainly an improvement.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it sounds like your roles, as you said, were heading down that more towards that high performance type roles where you're dealing with players that are, as you said, are serious
Yeah.
as opposed to that starting program. So you've had a few different roles in that space over the years. So tell me about some of those roles. So possibly maybe start with, say, Southwest Sydney Academy. Was
Yeah,
that kind
that
of the
was
first one, or?
that was pretty much my first exposure, and that was probably even before my Jack Newton days. That was probably my first exposure at that sort of type of program. I had done some they were called Rothman's camps and a number of things with Peter Knight, who was sort of the New South Wales coaching director at those times. So I've done a lot of camps, week-long camps and all those sorts of things with Peter. Up here in New South Wales, we had a program called the Talent Athlete Program where they'd go into the Sydney Academy of Sport and stay. So I had some exposure through that and through my, I guess, contact with Peter, who was sort of overseeing the regional academies in New South Wales at that point of time. And I lived out at sort of Southwest Sydney, and he sort of recommended me for that particular role. So that was probably my first exposure to what you might call, well, I call them now, they're probably the starting level of the high performance pathway here in New South Wales. So working with, might have been, I think, 12 kids at that particular time. They were all sort of single figure markers. We'd meet once a month on a Sunday afternoon. Was kind of my first exposure to an integrated program where they'd start having some opportunity to get some sports science and sports medicine exposure, some personal development exposure, learning various things like media skills, but also learning more about, the physiotherapy and strength conditioning and psychology and nutrition and all those other elements, performance elements that go in to, I guess, the modern athletic golfer these days. So that was really a good eye opener to me as well. And once I sort of had that, that's kind of where I knew from a career base, that's where I liked and where I wanted to go. Because it piqued my interest then to start learning about all those other areas as well. I think in a role like this, you certainly don't need to be an expert in all those areas, but you certainly need to have some level of knowledge in each of those various sort of areas. And I guess that's where I really found out, well, I think this is me. This is the career space that I'd sort of like to work in, and I was fortunate enough to do that for a few years. And I think that sort of then led into the Jack Newton role that I had in early 2000s. Because as I said, when I moved out of that school role, I started to oversee the regional academies. I was going out to visit those regional academies, the 9 of them across New South Wales, and running sort of coaching sessions, supporting the local coaches, the program coaches there, and really getting exposed to, the talented junior to under 18s, going to watch a lot of junior tournaments, talking with a lot of parents, interacting with a lot of other coaches about the development of those players. And then definitely when I come back there again later in 2008, when the program had stepped up more and there was actually probably more budget because of the private benefactor, I started implementing state level development programs. So it was the regional academies. And then above that, I commenced the Jack Newton Development Squad program, where we pretty much all took the regional academy, same thing, but took it up to that next level of golfer, not just the best kids in the region, but then basically sort of picking 20 kids from around the state to put in a similar type of program. So I was really fortunate through there then that you start actually having a lot more engagement with physios, working with sports psychologists, working with 3D people, working with nutritionists, getting to engage with a lot of other great coaches as well. So I really got to, I guess, expand my knowledge base
That's
through
cool.
that for sure.
No, that's really, really cool. I just wanted to touch back quickly on something you said earlier on. So, what was the change like in your coaching? So, you've gone from the typical golf coach and
Yep.
then being exposed to some more of this high performance stuff with Peter, who's obviously a very good coach, been on the podcast as well, and a great share of information, and is a great person to chat to. So, what changed in your coaching from that early exposure?
I guess the integration is more than anything else, and I certainly my knowledge become a lot more. I'd have to say, the PGA trainee program gives you a great grounding, but when you start to dig down into some of these burrows of coaching, you realize how much you don't know. You think you know a lot, but it's a case of you don't know what you don't know. So you just start digging down in a lot more rabbit holes. I started getting exposure to a lot more high level coaches than me, as well, and I just really had an interest. I just had a real sort of thirst for knowledge, I guess, to try and learn them more and more. So my coaching, I think, from a technical element became I guess more in depth when I had exposure to 3D people like Ryan Lumsden and Rob Neal and Mark Bull and guys like that. You just get to get knowledge from those guys that you just never had that opportunity before. Now I guess I look at it more. I guess you've only just got to watch the TV day. There's the tours these days. There's no one shoe fits all from a technical element, and I think there's so much more. I really went down, I think, I was an instructor model, now into I guess a coaching model and more holistic. And as I said before, particularly in the role that I'm in now, you definitely need to have, and I think all elite coaches do, you definitely need to have a holistic view of the athlete, not just necessarily the technical elements. You certainly need to know all those performance factors. And right at this top end, there's so many factors, from lifestyle factors that are involved that go into making those plays. So I guess, from the early model, I guess to answer your question directly, I guess I went from a direct instructor model to a holistic coaching model would probably be the biggest changes I went to.
That seems to be coming up heaps in this podcast with different coaches, and we had the guru Jason Sutton was on the podcast a couple of weeks ago, and he was talking about coaching rather than teaching, and it certainly is the space if you're going to go into that high performance area, and you should be doing it in all areas. I think is covering all areas as opposed to just being a technical coach. I think that is certainly where you should be aiming to be as a golf coach in the future.
Yeah, and that's definitely exposure to these programs has been great for me in that, because I've been very fortunate, to have a lot of that education just directly by being on the tee with guys working with 3D or sitting in lecture rooms and all that sort of stuff. When the nutritionist or the 3D guy, watching the sports psychologist work directly with the players and that as well. So there's been a lot of, I guess, development that I've just had. Just very fortunate to be, have the positions I've had and had the opportunity to work with some of the obviously the best minds in the sport from around the world. That's for sure. Yeah.
All that stuff's pretty cool. And I've said this before in the podcast, but when you start working with high performance players, they can actually, you give them a swing thing to do and they can do it straight away. You find out pretty quickly what you do and don't know about the golf swing.
Yes, that's exactly right. And you sort of, it is, depending on player from player, but you sort of, I found that you obviously, you kept things pretty simple early on because you really didn't know much, and that was kind of all what you knew, but you do go down in this rabbit burrow of knowledge. And I sometimes probably think it's nearly about, you just want to blurt out the latest things that you've just learned, or bring that or implement that to everything, to everyone that you learn. But the further and further I've gone along, is that most tour players, probably like to keep things pretty simple as well, but you got to try and keep things pretty simple. But you could obviously have a lot deeper underlying knowledge than what you did before, but they certainly don't want to, have the biomechanics manual read out to them and know everything about, some players they do like that deep knowledge, but from what I found, most like to keep things pretty simple as well. But you do need to have the underlying knowledge to answer those challenging questions when they do come, when you're working with that level of player, that's for sure. Or refer them if you can't answer, to admit that you don't know, and then definitely refer them on or find it out. That's for sure.
I think that is super advice, and I'm in that same camp of saying that you have to be across that information, but you don't obviously need to give all that information to your students. So, as a coach, you've got access to all this great technology, all these great experts in their different fields. How do you work out how to get that information across to the students standing in front of you as a coach?
Well, I guess the biggest thing, and again, coaching is a kind of a relationship. So you've really got to know that person in front of you. I think that's the first and foremost. Yeah, you've really got to sort of kind of know how that person ticks, how they like the information given to them. I think that's it's nearly the most important thing of coaching. Some people, as I said, really like that information, others don't. I think you need to, the whole assessment program, the assessment of the player, trying to work out what they require, what their strengths and weaknesses are. And particularly for a role that I'm in now, I really see that I'm, a supporter of the coach and the player. For the model up here is that we really support the home-based coaches. So I'm really there to, ascertain what the home-based coaches would like. I've spent a lot of time with the players as well, and you really get to know them through that. So you get to know what kind of makes them tick, and you get to see them train a lot. I mean, the advantage that we do probably have a lot in a role that I'm with compared to the home-based coaches is you get to see them compete a lot. So you get to maybe pick up on some of those things in the competitive environment that the coaches may not necessarily see, when they're just working with it at home. So you get to, I think, get a really holistic assessment of the player is the most important element, especially with working elite players, covering all areas, but really having that relationship with the player. And again, if you're in a role like mine, having that relationship with the coach is their home-based coach is extremely important as well.
Now, I'll put my hand up now, and I know I've screwed this up in the past. I've given too much information to a student, and had to backpedal quickly. So that can be a challenge sometimes if you have access to that information, giving too much to them straight away.
Oh, there's no doubt. I would have probably I would have done it more than once, I'm sure.
No, I've completely screwed it up plenty of times. Just to jump back a little bit, you said when you came back to work with in the junior program with Jack Newton, you were checking out talented junior golfers and finding out who could go down certain pathways. We spoke about talent ID on this podcast with Scotty and a couple of other guys only a few weeks ago, and it's a tough space to be in, talent ID in golf, because there's no generic. You have to be 6'2" to be able to play golf. You have to be this type of person to be able to play high performance golf. What was some of the things that you were trying to see in those talented juniors?
Well, I guess the first thing, and I guess I probably made of where I learnt the most, there was a particular, because early on in my Jack Newton days, I said that was part of my role. It was to go around to those regional academies and, you might sort of say talent identify players for the next level program, for the state level program, and get to know them and all those type of things as well. And I'd have to admit, the first thing you get swept away is generally the physical attributes, not necessarily that they're 6'4" or whatever. It's the hitting of the golf ball, and initially probably the distance they'd hit it. I strictly remember back to seeing a young kid, down the far south coast one day, a little kid, and he could just absolutely smoke it. And that's the first thing that really sort of, as a coach, captures you. That's the sound, the ball flight, and all that type of stuff. But I think a lot of the times that can, it's probably the initial part, but in the end, I really don't think it's the most important part. It's probably the elements that you can't see or probably can't even test that are most important elements. And I really feel like you can only really find that is spending enough time with the players. So I know we have talent ID, and talent ID is, I guess, what you might call that initial element of identifying somebody. And I listened to that podcast that you guys done on that talent ID, but I don't think the ID is nearly done within the development in my mind. It's not till you get somebody in a program and get to spend a significant amount of time with them, because you develop that relationship. You get to understand what makes them tick. You get to have those conversations with them over an extended period of time. And for me, the whole ID, when I look at ID or development, is how much more over time are they taking ownership of their golf game and of themselves. So to me, that's the ultimate ID. Is this player stepping up and going from being dependent on somebody to tell them what to do, to nearly to the other end, is the coach nearly becomes the servant, and you actually serving the player, and it becomes an equal discussion, So that ID space, again, you can kind of have it, but the physical for me can sort of be off throwing. And again, I can't remember the exact TV, but Wayne Gretzky, and I'm just trying to think of the NFL player, they had those combines that, never stood out in any of those. So skills that are done kind of in isolation, not necessarily within the competitive environment, or it's a skill that is isolated, whether it could be a physical skill, a technical skill, or whatever that is isolated, I think is a good ID method. You really need to see the holistic person in an environment for an extended period of time.
Yeah, and I think that's where we're kind of headed with that chat, was the fact that it does take time, and so I'm guessing with that space you're in, you had to rely pretty heavily on their personal coaches and those people that are seeing those kids all the time and seeing what kind of person they actually are.
Yeah, and look because I would have run around the whole New South Wales countryside running all various types of skills tests, and because it was part of what it was even a research thing that the government up here wanted me to do, is to come up with some testing protocols through the regional academies to have some sort of talent ID protocols that we used in golf, because there wasn't. I mean, we had the old national skills framework and all those type of things as well, but the thing about golf too is we have this handicap system as well. So the handicapper can be the initial talent ID as well, and knowing how long they've had the handicap, we can kind of go into there as well, because I done a whole heap of there was individual skills based, like chipping and putting and all that. There was a 9 holes thing. And there was also like a coach's eye component, and the skills challenge thing. It was nearly always the guy with the lowest handicap, because it was a cumulative thing. Nearly always won the skills challenge. But then you start delving down and engaging with the coaches, and they sort of say, well, he might have the lower handicap, but this player hasn't played as long, and I've given them a few lessons, and I can really see that they're very coachable. They'll go away and work on things. They are willing to listen. They're willing to get out of their comfort zone and try new things. So there's all these nearly things that you can't see initially. I think are the real identifying features of what we're trying to identify in a player that really is going to probably have the things that you need in the longer run, to get where they want to get, or where we'd like to get them to, anyway.
It's a challenging space, and as I said, well, even in sports where you do need certain physical attributes, they still screw it up occasionally as well. So you don't see top 10 draft picks. Those top 10 draft picks in AFL, for example, don't always go on to be the superstars of the game. There's always players that are picked up at pick 20 or pick 30 that go on to be superstar players. It's a challenging space.
Yeah, because any sport is an integration of a number of factors, isn't there? And anything done in isolation is not a true representation of the sport, So, I mean, the true ID is actually probably getting them out there to watch them in the competitive environment. That's the true ID, and then having those conversations with them over time. And again, to me, it's that greater ownership is what I'd be looking for in a player over an extended period of time. Are they owning this, what they're doing?
Completely agree. Completely agree. So, talk me through this role now with Golf New South Wales. So, you're the high performance boss there. Is that what the role title is?
Yeah, it's the high performance manager is the role. So, it is kind of I do coach a few of the players individually, but the primary role, as I've said, is to support those players. I mean, I oversee, it's multifaceted. I pretty much will oversee the whole talent ID program right from the regional academies level. So I'm responsible for I guess the development of the pathway and the programs and the implementation, overseeing the service providers that are part of those programs, any other supporting bodies that are involved in any level of development or of the golf pathway. So it is certainly multifaceted, but more, I guess, directly with the athletes is, I guess, to somewhat case manage those individuals and support them and their coaches. Obviously, we have an objective as a program, which, we come under Golf New South Wales themselves as an organisation is separate to One Golf at the moment, but from the high performance space, we're pretty much all trying to achieve the same outcomes as Golf Australia, and that's to identify and develop players that go on to be top 100 players in the world. So that's what we're looking to do. And again, you're even trying to do ID, because as even the players go up to the next level, there is an ID to see who has got those features that are going to be competitive at the next level, or you're really trying to foresee 2 or 3 levels in front of where you are. So that whole ID and development process nearly goes hand in hand. It's sort of hand in glove, and I guess that's kind of a lot of the role that I do. But it's definitely trying to support the players and the coaches in their development, provide them resources, allocate those resources within a budget, and then trying to identify to make sure that those players are on track to achieve the program goal of identifying the top 100 player, or identify top 100 players in the world. Because ultimately, a high performance program is a program that is utilised to grow the game. Obviously, people that are out there and high profile players that are getting seen playing the Masters or anything like that, we're hoping to draw players to the game. We'll get people playing more golf. So high performance could nearly say is like it's nearly a grassroots program. we are trying to use high performance players to grow the sport of golf. Obviously develop those individuals as well and support their goals. But obviously their goals need to work in with what an organisation's goals is as well for having a high performance program.
Challenging space, I'm sure, to have all those different segments trying to gel to work with that single golfer. That must be a challenging space to get it to work smoothly.
Oh yes, it does. It is, but it's that. I guess that's just part of the role. Managing relationships, managing resources, managing those things is definitely part of the role. Certainly, you need to be open and all those type of things as well. And a lot of the time, it's you've got to maybe put your own individual ego on the table as well. Because again, we are here to. I feel that I'm here to help the players and the coaches. Obviously, as I said, I do coach a couple of players within the program myself, but the majority of them I don't coach. So a lot of the times, you just got to sort of bite your tongue at times and really just support those players and coaches. Obviously, even at this level, the players, even though they're elite and getting to that, some of them, once they start to work out what that lifestyle may look like as a professional golfer, they're still trying to somewhat of them working out, do they really want to be pursuing this as well? So, and you do have those that are full steam ahead on that as well. So there's definitely there's multiple facets or areas of what you are trying to manage. That's for oversee. That's for sure.
I'm curious if you've had any players that have been identified as to be part of the program and said, "Nah, I'm happy with how I'm doing it myself," and they've gone off and done their own thing, or they all kind of jumped on board.
Um, yeah, look, I've probably not in recent times. I think what can a high performance program do? Like the way one of the things that I look at it is a high performance program can just potentially accelerate a player's development, in that they can have access to resources, particularly access to physio and strength conditioning and psychology and all those type of things as well, that they may not otherwise have access to, either due to funds potentially to be able to do that on outside of their own, or potential just lack of knowledge of what is in those areas and how that might be able to help their game. But I think a high performance program can accelerate it, but definitely the people that I'd like to have come into it are those people that feel like they could do this journey on their own, but really are grateful of the support and resources they could get coming into this program. I certainly don't want players coming in or people coming into this program to think, okay, I'm part of this program now, I'll just sit here and be a sponge and you do what you need to do as a high performance program. I want those people that are hungry, and we're on a pathway to doing this pretty much on their own, but are appreciative of the support that they can get through a program like this. They really need to have that hunger and would be willing to do it on their own if this wasn't the high performance program wasn't around. Um,
It's got to be a two-way street, doesn't it? They can't
yeah,
just
it
come
does.
in and expect it to be handed to them. They have to put in the work as well.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. You can't. The program's not going to make them a good player. To me, it's how they come in and utilize the program is what will make them a good player. They do have access, I feel, to world-class resources and knowledge and all that type of thing as well. But if they're just going to sit back on the hand and think that the program's going to impose themselves on them, they're coming in with the wrong attitude. You need to come in and be open-minded and willing to utilize the program, challenge the program, take everything that you possibly can from the program. Again, it's that taking ownership, to me, of your development and of the part of your development, and understanding what's required. Obviously, when you do come into a program like this at the very beginning, you don't know everything. Sometimes they feel like they do know everything, but they don't know everything they need to know about I guess life on tour and being a professional. So we do try and expose them to all facets of being, a high level golfer, as well as the tour life and being a professional golfer, because they are ultimately going to have their own business. So we try and educate them again of all those type of things, all aspects of being a professional golfer. But again, the further and further they go in, it goes on to me, well, are they taking ownership of this? Are they actually now they've got their hands on the steering wheel and controlling the ship, not just standing back waiting to be told what to do or to do this? And ultimately, that's what I'm looking for. That's for sure. Who's the CEO of their golfing business?
Makes sense. Makes sense. So you said you're still doing some coaching. There's some players that you're coaching inside of that program. Who are you still coaching at the moment?
Um, I've got three programs that I coach: Grace Kim, Belinda G, and Josh Gadd are all in the amateur level. And then I'm still coaching Cameron Davis. It's on the PGA Tour, who come through this program. As The role is, I guess, primarily managerial. Part of the role wasn't to take on any more new players as they come into the program. It is definitely to support their home-based coaches. So as players either drop off or whatever, I'm not taking on any more new players to individually coach. That's just part of sort of the role that I'm in, and I think it's reasonable as well, because there is. I'd certainly not leave any players, and Golf New South Wales didn't want me to leave any players out that I had coached. Because there's develop those relationship with those players, and I think it is still important to have my hand across coaching as well, because it is part of the role and still trying to improve my knowledge about coaching and all those type of things as well, because you're definitely trying to assist the home-based coaches within this type of role, and the more knowledge and still having your hand in coaching can only help you to, I think, communicate with the home-based coaches as well.
Completely agree. So I can see how that would work with the players that are in the program at the moment. How do you find the time to work with Cameron Davis when you're still, because he's obviously overseas playing and
Yeah.
you're in Australia still, and we can't travel too much with COVID at the moment. So how have you dealt in that space with Cameron?
Well, look, again, I was very fortunate. Golf New South Wales allowed me to keep coaching Cameron when I took on this role, because they obviously seen the benefit of me um, coaching a PGA Tour player, having that knowledge of actually going over to the events and seeing that firsthand and bringing that knowledge back that I'm gaining, because you go and stand on a PGA Tour event, you get to interact with other world-class coaches, you get to see other players, how they go about doing things, plus you're just getting to see the best players in the world. So from a gaining of knowledge and then bringing that back to our players, I think is a definite benefit for the program as well. And they were fortunate enough. Golf New South Wales allowed me, and with the job role that I had, they did allow me to still go and travel over to see Cameron probably 6 to 8 times a year, when I was able to travel. Going forward now, I guess in the COVID era, I haven't been travelled over. I had a funny experience during the start of COVID. I was literally going over to see Cameron. We're going to go to the Honda Classic, but go to TPI on the way over. And all this COVID stuff was just starting to all happen. And literally, when I hopped on the plane here to take off to the US, they were actually playing the Players Championship at that time, and was still playing. But by the time I'd actually got around to the other side of the world, I'd got off the plane that said the Tournament Players Championship was cancelled. The next three events were all cancelled, and I was scheduled to go and see, go to TPI and Scotty Cameron with Cameron at that particular visit, and they said, you've just travelled internationally, so you won't be able to come into the studio or to the factory. So I was literally on the ground in the US for 24 hours and flew back, and got back the night before that they closed the borders. But so that was an interesting trip. But currently now, I guess Cameron's caddy, Andrew, is more than just a caddy. So he's kind of been my eyes from a coaching standpoint, and he was even when I was going over there. So that caddy has an extremely important role. But I just stay in regular communication with Cameron's other team members, with Dr. Harry, who looks after his physical side. He also has Neil Smith, who's a well-known sports psych, on the mental side. But most recently, I just engaged Rob Neal to basically assist me in the technical side of things with Cameron, not just swing technique, but club testing and all those type of things as well that I might have sort of done a little bit with when I was with him. Cameron really got on well with Rob. He'd done some work with Rob previously over here in Australia, and Rob being on the ground, he literally just spent 2 days with Rob Neal down in Orlando and done some technical work. So I just get on the phone and get on my iPad. I guess the beauty of technology these days, I'm kind of there nearly in live time. Was up at sort of 4 o'clock in the morning, because they're on the East Coast this previous time, and just sitting in a lot of the conversations. They might do some work, and then I'd get on the phone and we'd have a conversation for half an hour or 45 minutes about some of the stuff that was going on or what Rob might have seen. And so I think we're very fortunate that Cameron Cameron, and I feel like myself built a very good team around Cameron. We all get on very well. We all work together very well. So I have total trust in all of his team members over there, and Cameron does too. That we can all work together to get that, even though I'm not over there. And I guess the part that I am missing, but it's fortunate Neil Smith goes to a lot of events, is just actually seeing him compete. And I really feel working with players at that level, you really do need to see them compete on the golf course to see how they're managing various shots. And I guess before Neil come on board, and I guess that's that whole idea of knowing when you've got to a point where you can't help anymore. I was a pseudo, I wouldn't call myself a sports psychologist, but was somewhat working on the mental side of Cam. But when I guess that message wasn't getting through anymore, we started to bring Neil in, and Neil's at quite a number of the tournaments. So, and Harry's as well, his physical guys at a number of tournaments as well. So a lot of the team is with him on the road a lot of the time, and they are very good at relaying a lot of the information about what's going on back to me. So it's very open. The most important thing is, I guess, at the moment is just that constant communication.
Awesome stuff. And again, it just sounds like you've got a good team there, and you've obviously been with Cameron for a fair while. So I'm assuming he's the same as every other golfer. He falls into similar patterns when things start going wrong. So you can hopefully get him back on track fairly straightforwardly online.
Yeah, and it goes back to that point of, as I said earlier, it's sort of nearly like the student and the, the instructor initially. It's kind of nearly now. Cameron comes back to me and says, "These are the things that I'm struggling a bit with. This is kind of what I'm working on to do it. What do you think?" So he's actually coming back to me and sort of saying, he's got the lead now, and he's nearly just coming back to me because he knows himself so well, and a lot of things, as what you say, they're patterns. What do you feel about these things? So it's nearly he leads nearly that, and it's, well, yes, I think that's great, or what about this, or trying this. And a lot of times it might be, for me now, a lot of it's just going through the stats. Here's some areas that you're struggling. What sort of drills, or how can we spend your Tuesdays and Wednesdays at tournaments, or how can we spend your off time, addressing some of these skill gap areas. Because you're always looking. We're very fortunate, I guess, with a player at that level, you have access to an unlimited amount of stats, and you're always comparing about where they are, and obviously have a plan for where they'd like to go, and you're trying to identify those gaps. So a lot of the times now it's looking at that and just trying to identify those skill gaps, and then bringing in those team members around to, address whether it is a mental, whether it's a technical, whether it's a physical, whether it's a strategic, whether it's a right, you bring in all those team members and have those conversations around that development and improvement to try and identify those skill gaps. So it's definitely I feel like I'm more of like a pit team manager or a crew boss now, rather than just directly a straight swing instructor. That's for sure.
Okay. Yeah, awesome, Khan. Thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate you coming, having chat to me. It's flown by. I've only got about halfway through my points that I had written down to cover with you, so I think we're going to have to get you back for part 2 at some stage in 2021. So hopefully we can do it in person as opposed to doing it online. Might be an enjoyable time. Have a couple of drinks as well while we're chatting.
No, I really appreciate it, Brent. And as you said, like when you've got a subject that you really enjoy talking about, and an hour does fly along pretty quickly. So I've really enjoyed the chat with you, and I look forward to the opportunity another time if it does come along to have another chat to you.
But just before I let you go, there is 4 questions that I like to throw at everybody. So You get to answer the fast 4 at the end of the podcast. So have you got any tips for coaches starting out in the coaching space?
Yeah, I guess to me, I think just see as many different coaches as you possibly can. Go and watch other coaches give lessons. And for me, in particular, I guess from a career standpoint, and I don't know if this is another question, so I'm hoping I'm not jumping the gun, but I actually sort of took a role where I actually went back financially, but it was in a role that with Jack Newton, I went backwards, but it was in a role that I knew that it's the direction I wanted to go. So I actually took less money, but to get into a role that I wanted to do. So I guess try and find out, not initially just chase after the money, I guess, but try and get into a role where you feel like this is the area that you want to get in and learn as much as possible. And I feel that because I've done that, I guess other doors open along the way and created opportunities that if I didn't have that particular role, that some other doors may not have opened up later on.
Yeah, I'm on the same page there. I took that job in overseas in China and Taiwan based on that fact that I was keen to get into that high performance space, and that was a stepping stone towards that. So I certainly would agree with that. Tips for golfers out there. So there's possibly a few golfers tuning into the podcast as well. So any tips for golfers starting out there on how to improve their games?
Well, I guess being a PGA member is, and being a coach myself, is to, I guess just to really try and find a coach that you can really work with. You know, I do believe to get better, that it's definitely better to work with somebody on that. I mean, obviously you can go on, there's a plethora of information that's available through, internet and all that these days. But what you need, when you certainly as you're going along, you need more personalized information, and some of that, the tips that you may get online may not be appropriate to your particular swing pattern or whatever. But I guess if there are more serious golfers, it's definitely try and seek out coaches that do take a holistic viewpoint of your game, not necessarily just technical. Obviously, there's technical elements, but for those that are serious golfers, seek out coaches that have a holistic look at your development and game improvement.
Cool, makes sense. You have to find that person that you click with. You can't just go along. You've got to find someone that you can work with and work with long term.
Yeah,
I think it's
absolutely.
great advice.
Yeah.
Where do you see yourself for golf coaching in 5 years' time?
Well, hopefully keep doing what I'm doing, to be perfectly honest. So I'd love to be still doing the role and what I'm doing. The opportunity for me to, just watch players grow. And I guess with the age group that you're working with, 15, 16-year-olds up to sort of 22, 23-year-olds, or even those first years on tour, so maybe up to early 20-year-olds, to see people, really chase after their goals. And, obviously some get all the way that they'd like to, some don't. But just that opportunity to engage with people that are really chasing after something, and to be able to help them and provide the opportunities through a role like this. So I guess to answer your question, probably pretty much just doing the same thing, but still, again, just trying to increase my knowledge, Again, this is a multifaceted position. So, just trying to look at other areas where I can improve myself, not only as a coach, but I guess as just a people manager now as well, will be important to me. Yeah.
Do you see any huge changes coming in the coaching field in the next 5 years? Anything that's going to jump out as being the brand new best thing coming out?
Yeah, look, it's interesting. There's obviously, I think we've ticked a lot of areas. There's still a lot of, I'm trying to think of the whole, uh, the glasses and all those type of things that they're wearing now, like, uh, in that mental space. I think there's plenty of things like that are still will be available. I mean, the technology curve keeps on turning and turning, but I feel like those, the ability to get into the head of the player at real time is very important. So anything around, I know they're not allowed to at the moment in competitive environments, but the opportunity to really get inside the player's head in real time and have a total appreciation of what they're thinking, because obviously sometimes we see a result outcome, but a lot of the times we may not know exactly what they're thinking. So I'm thinking a lot of times with Cameron, I'd love to have a thought bubble above his head while I'm watching him, play a particular shot, and have a full understanding of why that outcome, for whatever it was, positive and negative, why that come about. So I think something in the mental space, and there is a little bit obviously with devices, wearable devices, and that these days, but something in that competitive arena would be really, really exciting to see. Obviously the rules don't allow it, but it'd be really exciting to see something in that space. The players, I think, that television coverage you're doing these days now is amazing. More and more commentary and players being mic'd up and all that sort of stuff. I think is great for the sport, as a spectacle to watch, but it's also great insights that providers that the players are giving into the playing of the game as well.
Yeah, no, that's really cool. Is there anything that you would change in your career or life up until now?
No, not really. Look, I probably, as I said earlier at the start, from a playing perspective, wish I'd probably given myself a few more years. I may not have reached any further heights, but I certainly wish I'd probably given myself a few more years of playing. But I feel like I've had a number of great roles within my career. So I can't think of anything that I've missed. I really enjoy the opportunity that I've had, all the various roles that I've had, the coaches, the people that I've been able to learn off. So probably at the moment, no. I'm real happy with where I'm at. So there's probably nothing I would suggest that I would change.
That is completely fine. I haven't got any issue with that answer whatsoever. There's that's no problem whatsoever with that answer.
Yeah.
Where can people find you if they would like to get in touch? Have you got a presence on social media anywhere, or?
Not really. I'm not a big social media guy, to be perfectly honest. So, either just probably through the Golf New South Wales website. As I said, I mean, I am on social media, but I don't tend to post a lot. I tend to read and share, I guess. I mean, most of my social media handles and are all pretty much all just under my name. So anyone that sort of typed up my name under, whether it's they're not going to find much, to be perfectly honest. So, other than if I read an interesting article or something like that, I just sort of see them as, particularly for, I know the people that follow me, as more of an information sharing opportunity. But so I'd probably suggest just through sort of the Golf New South Wales, website, or just calling up through Golf New South Wales here. Definitely. Any parent, I feel like over the years that I've had this role, I've gathered a lot of information about various pathways, and I guess a lot of parents and players are coming, completing HSC and maybe still wondering what opportunities and pathways may be available for them. So certainly happy to talk to any players or parents that have any questions about that sort of stuff as well.
It's all good. I will put in the show notes, I'll put some links so you can find Khan. And again, thank you so much for your time today, mate. I appreciate you coming in, having a chat to me. Really cool conversation. That's my excuse for doing this podcast, is to talk coaching. I enjoy it. Talking with gurus like yourself and experts like yourself is certainly good fun. So again, mate, thank you so much.
Thanks, Brent. Cheers, mate. Take care.